Hello guys, this is Paul McWhorter from TopTechBoy.com, and we're here today with episode number 21, the Homework Solution Edition, in our incredible new tutorial series where you are going to learn artificial intelligence or you're going to die trying. What I'm going to need you to do is pour yourself a nice tall glass of ice cold coffee. That would be straight up black coffee poured over ice, no sugar, no sweeteners, none needed. And as you're pouring your coffee, as always, I want to give a shout out to you guys who are helping me out over at Patreon. It is your support and your encouragement that keeps this great content coming. You guys that are not helping out yet, take a look down in the description. There is a link over to my Patreon account. Think about hopping on over there and hooking a brother up. But enough of this shameless self-promotion. Let's jump in and talk about what I am going to teach you today. And what I'm going to teach you is I'm going to show you my solution to the homework assignment that I gave you in lesson number 21. And what that homework assignment was to write or create a class that would effectively and easily parse the data that is coming back from the Mediapipe pose estimation method. And so to take that object that is returned from Mediapipe pose estimation and to create an easy to use array of data, which will give you the positions of all of your major joints. So first of all, how many of you guys were able to do the homework? If you were able to do the homework, leave a comment down below. I am legend. And if you are not able to do the homework, leave a comment down below. I folded up like a cheap Walmart lawn chair. Okay, but enough of this introductory banter and chit chat. Let's jump in and let's get ready to learn some new stuff. So I will need you to call up the most excellent Visual Studio Code. And then we are over here working in our main Python working folder. I am going to create a new file with the little plus page. And this is going to be OpenCV-36, I do believe, .py. And the .py is kind of important. And boom, fresh new Python program just waiting to be written. Now, I don't want to start completely from scratch. I want to kind of start where we left off before. And we had a nice program that would fire up the webcam and would get Mediapipe running, and it had a class in there for parsing the hand data coming back, the hand landmarks coming back from Mediapipe. Let's start with that because I think it would be cool to have one program that has one class to do parsing of the hand data and another class to do parsing of the body data, the pose estimation. And if we have those two classes in one program, then we can very easily sort of do a whole lot of different things. So in order to kind of be where I am going to be on these lessons, I need you to call up the most excellent www.toptechboy.com, and then you can come over here to the happy little search bar and you can search on something like AI for everyone parsing hand position data. And if you do, you will come to this most excellent lesson, and you can come down here and click on the little 2-page icon, and boom, you copied this code to your clipboard. We can then come back to Visual Studio Code. We can paste that code. And now if I'm thinking right, this should do a hand analysis and should like highlight, I think, my index finger of either hand or both hands. So let's go ahead and run this and see what happens. Okay, boom. Let me see if I can point this over here a little better. Okay, you see there's my right hand, there's my left hand, and we are in fact analyzing the hand data quite nicely. So we have demonstrated that we are capable of copying and pasting stuff we did earlier. So I guess that shows that we are not completely incompetent and the universe is in proper working order. But instead of just doing the hand data, we also want to parse the data coming back from the pose estimator. And so here was our class that parses the data for the hands, And then down here is where we created our hand object, which we called find hands. So we're going to want to do something very similar to that, but we're going to add a new class, and what that new class is going to be called is class, and I'm going to call it MP pose for Mediapipe pose. You could call it kitty litter box if you wanted, but I think MP pose is a little more descriptive. And then what are we going to want to do in this class? Well, we're going to want to import Mediapipe as MP. All right, and now we have to define our init method, and the init method in a class is the method that is called whenever you create an object based on this class. So when I create an object based on the class MP pose, it's going to run down here, and it is going to run this init method. And so if it's going to run an init method, we better define one. So I'm going to define the method underscore underscore init underscore underscore. That's very specific, and it is specifically the method that is run when you create a new object. Now, what are we going to need in this? Well, we are going to need to pass it some parameters. We're going to need it to know who it is, so pass it self. And self will be like, if I create an MP pose object called my pose, then self will be my pose. If I create later on an object that is called my kitty litter box, then self is going to be my kitty litter box. Whatever you create that object, whatever you name that object that you create to interact with, that is what self is going to be. And so this init needs to know that. It needs to know who it is. Now I need to set some parameters. I'm going to set some defaults. Now we could pass parameters when we create our object, but I'm going to put in default values here because most of the time I'm just going to use the default values, and that way I don't have to pass a lot of parameters. But the parameters that I would need is, I would need to know, am I working with a still image? So I'm going to call it still. I'm going to say that's equal to false because I like to work on live videos, so that would be false. Now another parameter that you can set is, do you want the upper body only, or do you want everything? So I'm going to say upper body equal false because I want to do a whole body analysis, not an upper body analysis. And then do you want to smooth the data? Smooth data is going to be equal to true. And then I have two parameters. The tolerance 1 is equal to 0.5 and tolerance 2 is equal to 0.5, like that. And now I think I've got this pretty well done. All right, and then I'm going to need a colon at the end of it. All right, now understand, if you are going to do something and you wanted to do a still image, don't come in here and edit this class. Don't come in this class and make that false. What you would do is down here where you created your MP pose object, this is MP hands, but if you created MP pose, you would pass it in here the parameters that you wanted, which might be like false. It might be like false, or it might be like true. If you were going to do a still image, true, comma, false, comma, true, and then comma 0.5, comma 0.5, you would pass that, and then it would use what you passed instead of using these. It only uses these if you don't pass it something. I think that you can never review too much how these classes work, okay, because they're very, very powerful, but you got to kind of think about it a little bit. All right, well, what do I want to do? If I create an MP pose object based on this MP pose class, what I'm going to need to do is I'm going to then need to create a Mediapipe object, but I'm going to do that inside of this init. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to call that self, because you know you've got to use the name of the object that you created, and so that would be what the self was. And then I'm just going to call it my pose. I could call it my cat box if I wanted to, but I'm going to call it my pose. Notice that this my pose has nothing to do with MP pose. This is a new name that I am giving this object, and I'm calling it my pose. You could call it something else, all right? And that is going to be equal to self. your object name dot mpMediapipe.solutions plural dot pose little p dot pose big P. Could they have made it any more confusing? I don't think so. And then what we need to do is we need to give it those parameters that we passed it, which would be what? Still, with two L's, upper body, and then smooth data, and then tolerance 1, and then tolerance 2, like that. Okay, I think that should work, and it should get these when it calls this. It should know it and it should get it. So if you don't specify, you're going to get a false, false, true, 0.5, 0.5. But if you do specify it, then you're going to get what you specified. And so let's look at that. I think that that is what I need to do inside of, I think that's what I need to do inside of this init. I create the Mediapipe object. Okay, let's just run this to make sure we don't have a problem. I like to run it as I go before I get too far into it. Okay, it's not doing anything because I haven't even created an object, but my hand analyzer is still working. So really what would probably be smart at this point would be to come down here and actually create our pose object. So instead of find hands, I'm going to say find pose, and that's going to be equal to MP pose. That's the class, and then I'm not going to pass it anything. I'm just going to use the default parameters. All right, so it'll be find pose. And then here, let's just make sure that I am passing something, that you make sure that we've got this data structure working right. So what I'm going to come down here is now I'm going to say print. I'm going to say print still upper body and smooth data. Okay, and we just want to make sure that when we pass something, that this class is working the way that we think it is. All right, so this time it'll actually run it. It didn't run it before because we didn't create an object. So let's do that. Okay, that's working. All right, and now look at this. What it had was it printed false, false, true. Why? Because those were the defaults up here, false, false, true. But now let's see if we did this. I'm not sure if I have to put them all in, but we're just going to do a little trial and error here. If I put here, what if I put false, false, false? I don't know if I need to put the rest of them in, but if I do that, let's just make sure that it gets down into the program. Okay, and let's see here. All right, look at that. Boom. Do you see what I got here? I got a false, 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 and that's just saying that I am effectively able to change those default parameters by putting things in the parentheses here, but I want to use these, so I'm not going to pass it anything, and I can get rid of this extraneous print. Believe it or not, I have to still think about the classes. I'm not just automatic. I wanted to make sure that I was getting the data down into this init method. Okay, so the init method is done. Now we've got to do the method that actually does the work. And so I'm going to call that method marks because it's going to find the landmarks of your entire body pose. So I'm going to call it marks. Well, marks is going to need to know who it is, so I got to pass it self, and then it is going to need a frame. Okay, so I'm going to have to pass it the frame. When I call it, I'll have to pass it the frame. All right. Now that frame is in what? It is in blue, green, red. The rest of the world operates in what? RGB. So we better convert it to RGB. So I'm going to say frame RGB is going to be equal to CV2.CVT color. All right. What do I want to convert? I want to convert frame. And how do I want to convert it? Using CV2.color underscore BGR to RGB, like that. Okay, so that should give me the frame that I wanted. Now I need to analyze that frame. And so I want to get back some results. Okay, you could call it cinnamon toast if you wanted to, but since it's going to be the results, I will call it results. And results is going to be equal to, now this we have to think about a little bit. We've got to start with the object name, the object that we created, which, the object that we created was what? The object that we created was find pose, okay, but up here, what is find pose? It is going to be self, okay, so self will take on the name find pose because we named the object find pose, so self is going to be find pose, so it's going to be self dot what? Self dot my pose, okay, self dot my pose. Now, which is that? That's this object that we created, this Mediapipe object that we created was my pose. Self is the class object name. My pose is the Mediapipe object name. So since I called this my pose, I need to call this my pose, and then that will give me all the rest of that kind of automatically. And then what do I want to do? I want to process. What do I want to process? I want to process frame. No, frame RGB, like that. Okay, I want to do that. And then what I want to do is I want to say if I have a result. So if results dot what? Dot pose underscore landmarks. If it's that, then what do I want to do? So this is just saying if it finds a person and finds a pose, now that's going to be that big long array of data, and now I need to kind of bust it up and make it easy to work with. And if this doesn't make sense, go back to, it might have been like lesson number 19 when I did this, lesson 21, I showed you how to do this. Go back to lesson 21 because I show you how this data structure works. So I don't want to re-explain that today. What I want to do is I just want to show you how to take what we did last week and put it in a class. So now, what do we want to do? We want to step through the landmarks. If there is a result, we want to step through each one of the landmarks in the pose. So I will say for LM, that's kind of like shorthand for landmarks, for LM in what? Results dot what? Dot pose landmarks, okay, and then remember there was that little tag landmark, so we'll need another landmark like that. And these you don't get to pick up stuff. You can't put kitty litter box here. These are very specific methods in Mediapipe, so it's got to be just like that. Capitalization and singular plural are very important here, and as well as for in most forms of the English language is spelled with one F. And so now that's looking a lot happier there. So now what do we want to do as we step through that? What we want to do is we want to now create an array of tuples that'll have like the XY position of this part of my eye, comma, the XY position of the center of my eye, comma, the XY position of this part of my eye, comma, the XY position of my nose. So it's going to be a set of tuples of XY values and XY values of what? All of the things that come back from pose, starting with the nose and ending with the toes. That just worked out. I hope 32 is the highest one. Let's see. Yeah, I think so. You still can't quite see that, but yeah, it's the right foot. So it's the very bottom one from the nose to the toes, and then you can kind of look at this, and this is the order that data is going to be in. That is the order that the data is going to be in. So I want to grab that complicated, gnarled up data structure, and I want to turn it into a simple array of XY tuples. So how would I do that? I would need to create an array to put this data into. So before the for loop, I'm going to create the array, and I'm just going to call it pose landmarks, like that and say it's an empty array, and now I will just append the data into that. And so then what I would do is I would come in here and I would say pose landmarks like that, dot what, dot append. I want to append data to this empty array. And then what do I want to append? Well, kind of like really simply, if I wanted to do the simplest thing possible, what I would do is I would just append the a tuple, right? I want a tuple, so I put another set of parentheses. So this will be an open parenthesis, x comma y, a closed parenthesis. So I want that tuple, like that coordinate, that xy coordinate. And that is why I put an extra parenthesis there. And then what I would want is lm my landmark dot its x value, comma lm dot its what? Dot its y value. Now that would just be super cool, but what is the problem? lm.x and lm.y are normalized from 0 to 1, 0 being the left of the frame and 1 being the right of the frame, and in y, 0 being the top of the frame and the bottom of the frame. So that's how it's oriented. So I need to turn this to real pixel values. So what I need to do is on the x multiply it by the width, which we set here, okay, which we set here, and then the y I want to multiply by what? By the height, like that. Right. Now what's wrong with that? lm.x is a floating point number, and if I multiply that by an integer, I will get a floating point number, and then later on certainly something is going to crash because OpenCV wants integers. So I'm going to just nip this little problem in the bud. I am going to turn lm.x times width, I'm going to turn that into an int, and then I'm going to turn this into an int. You see, if you just deal with it now, you won't get surprised later. All right, like that. So now I think I should have all my landmarks, and it should be an array of tuples. And so I think here what I'm going to do is after I come out of this for loop, I'm just going to print pose landmarks just to make sure that I'm getting data there and it looks good. And we'll take that print out later, but let's just see if this thing is running. What? Doesn't like pose landmarks. What did I misspell? Pose landmarks. Man, that looks the same, doesn't it? This is, I'm sure you guys already see it. Why does it not like print? Oh, what that means is I didn't finish this line up here. Okay, this is going to close. I've got a parenthesis problem. So this opens the append, this closes the append. Okay, this opens the tuple, and I didn't close the tuple, like that. Okay, so let's check our parentheses. This opens the append, this closes the append. This opens the tuple, this closes the tuple. This opens the int, this closes the int, this opens the int, this closes the int. So all the parentheses now match. And that's what caused the problem. It was the line before the line that I was getting the error in. Okay, look at that. All right, very good. But now, why did I not get this thing to print? Because I created the object here. I created the object find pose. And when I create that object based on the MP pose class, it will come up to MP pose class and it will run the init. Okay, but I never called the marks. I never called the marks method. So I better do that here. And just like here, how I said results with self.hands, I called the hands method in the other class, but I never called this one. So here, after I do all my hand stuff, then I'm going to say results is going to be equal to self dot, what did I call it? I called it wow, I'm really in the wrong place here. Oops. I was editing the MP hands. That would not be good. All right, so what I want to do down here in the while loop, all right, in the while loop, I got the hand data. I called the find hands marks, all right, and so that would be, what is find hands? That is the hands class object. So I need to do the same thing for find pose. Okay, so what I would do here is I would say pose data. You could call it whatever you wanted, but then that is going to be find pose dot marks of frame, like that. And let's make sure we call the method marks in MP hands, and we called it marks here as well. And so now I think that should call it. So let's go ahead and run it now. And now it should not only show the hand data, it should print something. Okay, so you see it's finding me, and then what it is doing is it is printing an array that has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. You can see it's like the 32, or probably since you're starting at 0, the 33 points of where my pose is. And if you look at it, they all look pretty good, given that we started with a width of width of 1280 and a height of 720, and so these things all kind of they all kind of make sense, I think. Okay, so now let's get rid of that print up there. Let's get back to our MP pose. Okay, we're going to get back to our MP pose. We're not going to print it. Okay, we are not going to print it, but what we are going to do is, and this is after the if, it's out of the for loop, and it is at the same hierarchy as the if. We're going to say return, and what are we going to return? Pose landmarks, like that. All right, and it is happy with that. Then when we come down here and we call that, we say we said pose data. Now I'm going to take this and move it, so let's cut that, because what I want to do is I found the hand data and then I did something with the hand data. Now what I want to do is I want to find the pose, and that is not in the for loop. All right, now what do I want to do? I want to do something with it. So let's draw a circle. This is a nice little thing here for drawing a circle, so I'll get that. This is not indented because I'm just going to do it every time. All right, I better I'm just trying to think what would happen if it doesn't see a person. We'll have to think about that, but you see, I've just got to be sure that I'm not going to do something like a crash if there's not a person in the picture. But let's just go ahead and try this. So what we are going to do is we're going to do frame, and then what we are going to do is let's do the nose, which would be pose data. And then where is the nose? I'm sure you remember this, but the nose is 0.0. And so that would in fact be our index. So we will come back over here. And which data point do we want on the pose data? We want 0.0, and then that will return us a tuple. And then let's make this smaller. And then let's make this green, blue, green, 255. These others will be 0. Okay, so if I'm thinking right, this should track my nose, if I am thinking right. Let's try it. Okay, there it is. You see? Yeah. Tracking my nose, tracking my hand. Okay, so that is working right. I just want to see, I kind of think this probably should crash if I don't have a person in here. So let's try it again and just see what happens. Like if I take the person out. Yeah, I think that if it doesn't have something to look at, it is going to crash. So let's try that again. So you see, you guys always have to think as you're doing this code, just because it runs when you do the obvious thing, are there going to be things that cause a problem later on? What is this? Did it crash again? Now that one I would have trouble understanding. Okay, there's the nose, there's the hand. That's good. But if there's not a person in it, it's going to crash. So let's just see that. So if I just cover this up, yeah, it crashes. So what I want to make sure is I only do this if I have data. So I would want to say like if length of, I think this is a command, pose data, if length of pose data is not equal to 0, then I will do this. But if it is equal to 0, then I won't come in here and try to put a circle there. So if there's not a person, if there's not a nose, don't try to do this. Okay, there it is. And then you see I can cover everything up and it doesn't crash. It's happy when it sees a nose. It's happy when it doesn't see a nose. All right, guys, this is pretty cool. What do we have now? We have a simple program with 2 classes. We can use these classes in our new programs. We can use these classes in future programs. We can use these classes in future homework. But it takes this really gnarly data structure that comes back from Mediapipe and creates a simple array of XY tuples that have the position of the different landmarks. And then we have these 2 handy dandy charts that show us what is the order or what is the index template, the index legend for the hands, and then this is the index legend for the whole body pose. And so that is pretty neat. That is pretty cool. Okay, we're going to play with this pose a little bit more next week. You know how we kind of did the game with the hands, the Pong game based on the hands. What we'll do next week is probably start thinking about some sort of game or something that we can develop using our new pose estimator. But you can see all types of stuff, man. You could have all kinds of hand signals or body signals that could then make your computer do different things. Your computer could be watching you, and then you could flash it a sign, and then interesting things could happen based on the gestures that it sees either in your hands or in your body motions. Now, why would you do it? Like if you're sitting in front of the camera, something like a thumbs up would be very easy to analyze. But if you're looking out the window and watching people walk by, like if they wanted to open the gate, it would be probably easier to give a hand signal based on a body pose than it trying to figure out what the hands were doing that far away. So you see there's really places for both of there's places that you would use both of these things. All right, guys, I really hope that you guys are having as much fun taking these lessons as I am making them. What I really appreciate is I appreciate it when you get your homework done. Post your homework on YouTube, then on the comments down below, leave a link to your YouTube video. When you post your homework solution in the description, make sure that you put a link back to this lesson so people kind of know what you're doing. They have context for what you're posting. Also, some of you guys are posting your YouTube videos where it doesn't accept comments. Man, make it a public video and make it where people can look at it and comment on it. I think some of you guys are already starting to get subscribers and people looking at your homework solutions, and so I think that is pretty cool. Okay, guys, if you like the video, make sure that you give us a thumbs up. If you've not subscribed to the channel already, subscribe. When you subscribe, make sure you ring that bell so you will get notifications for future lessons. This is Paul McWhorter with toptechboy.com. I will talk to you guys later.